You are in the wrong seat. Move right now. The ice-cold voice of Chief Flight Attendant Linda Hayes cut through the first-class cabin of Oceanic Airlines Flight 447. It was not a reminder. It was an order. Her gaze was like a blade, slicing straight into the calm of the man seated quietly in 2A. Victor Caldwell, 45, looked up from the thick stack of documents about a merger deal worth hundreds of millions of dollars. The cabin light reflected off the thin frames of his glasses, concealing the sharp glint in his eyes. But to Linda, all she saw was a black man in a modest suit, someone unworthy of sitting among the luxury of the clouds. Behind him, Ethan Bradley, a white businessman barely into his 30s, tapped his shoe impatiently against the floor. "This is my seat," he said heavily, irritation in his eyes. Victor kept his voice steady, holding up the boarding pass that still smelled of fresh ink. "I am sorry, but this is the seat assigned to me." Linda snatched the ticket from his hand without a glance. "Anyone can print fake papers. This passenger here has paid in full for first class." She pointed toward Ethan, her voice sharp. "As for you, you should go back to where you belong." The entire cabin fell silent. No one moved, but phones began to lift discreetly. A young woman in seat 2B, Sophie Miller, 28, a marketing director, quietly tapped her screen to go live on Instagram. Across the small screen, the words "discrimination on Flight 447" blinked. Viewers climbed quickly from a handful to dozens. Victor drew a slow breath, keeping it even. In the leather case on his lap were not just contracts, but the future of Oceanic Airlines itself. Tomorrow, he would sit in the boardroom and cast the deciding vote on a strategic investment package. But today, in front of strangers, he was only a passenger treated with contempt, dismissed as an imposter. Linda folded her arms and blocked the aisle, her face carrying the arrogance of 12 years in the skies. "Do not make this difficult. We have 18 minutes until takeoff. You are holding up the entire flight." Ethan smirked, his gold watch glinting under the light. "Finally, someone is handling this properly. I have a connection in Atlanta. I cannot be delayed just because." He left the sentence hanging, but his eyes said everything. Because of someone like Victor. In that moment, Victor felt the chill spread through the cabin. Not from the air conditioning, but from the eyes of those convinced he did not belong here. Part of him wanted to leap up and shout the truth, but he held back. Years in billion-dollar boardrooms had taught him that the greatest power does not come from shouting, but from waiting for the right moment. Sophie angled her phone, capturing the entire scene. Linda standing firm, Ethan restless, Victor silent yet steady, his eyes glowing. Comments flooded the feed. "This is racism! Call the news!" "Unbelievable in 2025, an elderly couple in row 3 whispered nervously. A businessman in 4C shook his head in disgust. People murmured, but no one stepped in. A blanket of complicit silence smothered the multi-million-dollar cabin. Victor's phone buzzed, a message from his assistant. "The board is asking if you have a comment on the Washington Post investigating Oceanic." He silenced it, his gaze still fixed on Linda. The irony stung. Tomorrow he would decide the fate of this very airline. Yet today, he was living proof of the problem the industry refused to admit. Linda lowered her voice, but loud enough for all to hear. "You have two choices. Go down willingly, or I call security. Believe me, they will be more than happy to drag you out of here." Victor did not answer. He closed his case, resting a hand on the soft leather lid, instinctively guarding what was inside. Around him, every eye was locked on him. On one side, the arrogant authority of the crew. On the other, the dangerous stillness of a man being misjudged. Sophie lifted her eyes from her phone. In them flickered a sense of something more, a feeling that the quiet man before her was not just another passenger. The rest of the cabin did not know that the real storm had only just begun. The air in the first-class cabin felt as if every molecule of oxygen had been drawn into that single moment. Victor Caldwell remained seated in 2A, his back straight, his eyes cold and sharp, his hand tightening around the handle of his leather case. He pulled out a slim wallet, withdrew his gleaming Platinum Elite card along with his boarding pass, and held them directly toward Linda Hayes. "Here are my ticket and my membership card. For 8 consecutive years, I have been a loyal customer of Oceanic Airlines. Seat 2A is mine." Linda glanced at them as if they were scraps of paper. A mocking laugh slipped from her lips. "Fake cards are everywhere these days. I have seen dozens try to sneak upgrades. Do not think a piece of plastic will make me believe you." The entire cabin jolted at her words. No one had expected a senior flight attendant to demean a passenger so publicly. Some bowed their heads, avoiding involvement. But Sophie Miller did not. She quietly adjusted the angle of her phone, capturing Linda's sneer perfectly. Behind them, Ethan Bradley crossed his legs, a smirk curling at his mouth. "See, I told you. This is my seat. Settle this quickly so we can take off." He flicked his gold watch into view, the gesture dripping with arrogance. Victor placed his ticket and card on the tray table, letting his eyes sweep the cabin. He saw the elderly couple in row 3 shaking their heads, a young businessman in row 4 covering his face in shame. But he also saw Sophie's eyes, locked on him, her live stream numbers climbing at a frantic pace. Comments flooded in. "This is blatant racism. Send this straight to the press. Oceanic is going to pay for this." Linda folded her arms, raising her voice so the entire cabin could hear. "We have a legitimate passenger waiting, and you are delaying the flight. Company policy requires your cooperation. If you refuse, I will call security." Victor's face did not change. He reached into his case, took out a silver business card, and almost presented it, but paused. Not yet. Playing his trump card too early would be a waste. Instead, he slid the boarding pass back toward Linda and said evenly, "I bought this ticket. I will sit in the seat that is mine." Linda's lip twitched, her arrogance clearly rattled. She stepped closer, her shadow falling over Victor like a figure of authority, trying to block out the light. "If you do not move, I will treat this as refusal to comply with crew orders, a federal offense. When security arrives, you will have no choice." The silence that followed was suffocating. Then Ethan's voice cut through, loud and deliberate. "We are all busy. Some of us have real work to do. If he wants to cause trouble, send him to coach or throw him off altogether." Victor closed his eyes for 2 seconds. In his mind, he heard the familiar chime of boardrooms, the sound of gavels closing billion-dollar deals. Today, he was being forced into a moment that Oceanic would regret. But he knew that to win, he needed to control his breathing, control his timing. His phone buzzed again. Another message from his assistant. CNN just called. They want your comment on the airline being accused of discrimination. He silenced it, a bitter yet knowing smile brushing his lips. Toward the back of first class, a man in a grey suit muttered, "This is insane. One look at him, and you know he is not a fraud. The way they are treating him is disgraceful." His phone lifted, adding another recording to the scene. Linda realized her authority was slipping as more and more cameras pointed her way. Her voice snapped like a curfew order. "This is the final time. Either walk out on your own or be dragged out." Victor opened his eyes and locked on to her. The answer did not come right away. He let the silence stretch, each second stabbing into the skin of everyone watching. Finally he spoke, slowly, each word heavy as stone. "I am used to being underestimated. But believe me, this will not end in silence." The cabin froze. Linda faltered, her pride shaken by the very man she had dismissed. Ethan grimaced and looked away. Sophie held her breath, her eyes glued to the phone screen as the live stream count soared past 1,000 viewers. Victor leaned back, his chin lifted. He knew every gaze, every camera, was waiting to see him dragged out in humiliation. But in his mind, he already saw the twist that was coming. And when it came, none of them, Linda, Ethan, or Oceanic Airlines, would ever be the same again. The loudspeaker crackled from the cockpit. "Passengers, please settle into your seats. This flight will depart in 15 minutes. But in first class, nothing was settled. Linda Hayes still stood, blocking the aisle, her eyes like an iron wall. She no longer bothered to mask her irritation, her voice carrying through the cabin. "The man in seat 2A is delaying the flight. If you do not leave, I will call security to have you removed." Victor Caldwell sat motionless, one hand resting lightly on his leather case, his breathing steady. He was no stranger to tense situations, to negotiations where even a single glance could unnerve opponents. But this time, his adversary was not hardened investors on Wall Street. It was a chief flight attendant drunk on authority. Sophie Miller's live stream had passed 1,200 viewers. Comments poured in. "Do not leave that seat. Zoom in on the flight attendant. This will be the lawsuit of the century." In 3A, an elderly woman whispered to her husband, "Poor man. His ticket is valid, and they still doubt him." Her husband simply nodded, his eyes fixed on the scene. Victor checked his phone, the screen lit with missed calls, from his assistant, from partners, from reporters. He silenced it, his face betraying nothing. Inside, a storm swirled, but he knew power only revealed itself after patience had run its course. A voice rose from the economy cabin, lone yet firm. "Let him sit. I clearly saw his ticket is real." Linda snapped her head around, her glare sharp. "Get back to your station, Marcus." It was Marcus Lee, a 25-year-old junior attendant whose brown skin gave him intimate knowledge of the injustice unfolding. But Linda cut him down cold. "You have no authority in this cabin. Step back." Marcus bit his lip and retreated, but the look he left behind, helpless, furious, was captured by a few passengers on video. Victor slowly lifted his case, pulling out a silver business card. Linda frowned. "Put that away. This is not your office." He placed the card face down on the tray table. No one could see what it was. His voice was low, just enough for those nearby to hear. "Perhaps you should call a supervisor. I believe this is beyond your authority." Linda laughed dryly, the sound cutting sharp through the cabin. "I have full authority here. You do not know the rules. Now move, or I will have you dragged out." Sophie held her breath, her phone trembling in her hand. She knew in that instant the chief attendant had crossed a line. She typed quickly into the live stream caption, "Flight 4047. Witness racial profiling." Viewers surged past 30, 200. Comments flooded. "Tag CNN. Send this to BBC. This is going to explode." Victor sat tall, his gaze locked on Linda, his eyes like steel. He knew that if he stood now, he would be seen as defeated. But if he remained, every phone recording would become his ally. The loudspeaker blared again. 10 minutes to departure. Boarding doors will close shortly." Linda lifted her radio, her voice sharp with command. "Ground control, this is Hayes. I need security to board. Passenger in 2A is non-compliant." The words reverberated across the cabin. A swell of voices rose. "This is insane. He did nothing wrong. This is clearly racism." Ethan Bradley, the man behind him, tried to cut in. "I do not want to be involved. Just keep this flight on time. Anyone can see he is causing trouble." But this time, no one echoed him. Even he seemed unsettled by the escalation. Victor closed his phone and rested his hand on his case. In his mind, he recalled boardroom sessions where a single vote of his could strip billions from Oceanic Airlines. And now, bitter irony, this very airline was painting him as a troublemaker. Linda turned back, her eyes burning. "You have officially delayed this flight. This is a federal offense. When security arrives, you will be taken off and possibly banned for life." In that moment, Victor smiled. A cold smile, not of fear, but of a man who had already seen the board laid out. His voice was calm, low, yet clear enough to be picked up by multiple recording phones. "If you believe I do not belong in this seat, you are about to realize you have made the most costly mistake of your career." No one in the cabin fully grasped the meaning behind his words, but Sophie, with her marketer's instinct, knew one thing. This was the spark of an earthquake. The sound of footsteps echoed from the entrance. Security was approaching, and no one in first class knew that when they entered, the balance of power would begin to shift. The cabin door burst open. 3 figures in uniform hurried in, bringing with them a chill from the corridor. One of them was Rosa Alvarez, senior supervisor of first class with 15 years of experience. Right behind her was Mike Turner, head of ground operations, his breath quick but his eyes already flashing with familiar authority. Linda Hayes straightened immediately, her voice sharp and ringing. "Here they are. Passenger 2A is non-compliant, using forged documents, delaying the flight. I need him removed at once." The accusations landed in the cabin like a hammer blow. Some passengers gasped. Sophie Miller gripped her phone tighter, her fingers racing across the screen. "Supervisor now on board. False accusation continues." Her live stream surged past 5,000 viewers, comments erupting like wildfire. "My God, the ticket is clearly valid. Zoom in on their faces. Get him a lawyer now." Victor Caldwell rose slowly. His leather case remained in his hand, his spine straight as steel. He did not shout, did not resist. He simply extended his boarding pass and Platinum Elite card to Rosa. "Please verify them," he said, his voice even, without a tremor, yet carrying a weight that held the entire cabin silent. Rosa took them, her brow tightening. Every detail was valid. But before she could speak, Linda leaned in close, whispering into her ear. No one could hear the words, only the motion of her lips. "Forged, fraudulent upgrade, troublemaker." When Rosa lifted her eyes again, they were different, harder, colder. "Sir," she said, "cases like this happen often. Company policy is to resolve them as smoothly as possible. We have available seats in business class. You can sit there." Murmurs swept through the cabin. A young businessman snapped, "This is blatant injustice." An elderly woman in row 3 exclaimed, "Why should he move down when his ticket clearly says 2A? Victor drew a long breath, his hand tightening on the case handle. With every second of his silence, Sophie's live stream climbed higher. 6,200, 7,400, 8,000. Ethan Bradley, still waiting for his chance, interjected quickly. "I paid in full. Seat 2A belongs to me. He is just clinging to a privilege that is not his." Victor turned, his gaze cutting through Ethan like a blade of ice. But instead of answering, he fixed his eyes on Rosa. "With all due respect," he said, his voice low yet resonant in the hush, "I paid for this seat. I have confirmation, a flight history, a membership card. I am not asking for another seat. I am asking only for what I already paid for." Sophie's camera stayed steady, her eyes shining. Deep inside, a strange certainty stirred. This man was no ordinary passenger. The way he spoke, the way he measured his breath, it was the same aura she had seen in CEOs who never allowed themselves to be cornered. Mike Turner stepped forward now, his tone curt. "Sir, I need you to step off this plane. We will resolve this on the ground. If you refuse, security will intervene." The cabin erupted in voices. "This is racism," one shouted. "Just check the documents. They are valid," another cried. But Rosa and Mike still blocked the path, while Linda's faint smile suggested she believed she had already won. Victor scanned the cabin. He saw unfamiliar faces. Some averted their eyes, some burned with anger, some streamed livid with the trembling hands. And he knew that every glance, every camera, every comment beyond those walls was leaning toward him. He gave a slight nod, slipping his ticket and card back into his pocket. Then he lifted his case and stood tall. "Very well," he said, his voice cold. "I will leave this seat. But remember this, when the truth comes out, the cost will not be just one delayed flight." A shiver rippled through the cabin. Ethan raised his brows. Linda faltered for a heartbeat, and Rosa gripped the ticket tighter in her hand. Victor stepped slowly into the aisle. Every step he took was watched not only by the passengers in that cabin, but by tens of thousands of eyes across countless screens streaming live. In that moment, one thing became clearer than ever. Oceanic Airlines had just planted a seed of mistake, and it was about to grow into the greatest storm in the company's history. The cabin announcement echoed, 10 minutes until the aircraft doors close. Prepare for departure. But in first class, every second felt like a blade cutting through the air. Victor Caldwell still stood firm, the heavy leather case in his hand. Across the aisle, Linda Hayes gripped her radio tightly, her voice sharp as a hammer striking steel. "Ground control, this is Hayes. I need security at gate B7 immediately. We have a non-compliant passenger." Her words rang like a verdict. Passengers in the cabin stirred in agitation. Some snapped photos, some filmed video, some whispered with outrage. Yet no one stepped in. The silence of complicity spread once more, broken only by the sound of a live stream. On Sophie Miller's phone, the viewer count leapt. 9,500, 10,700, 11,800. Comments scrolled like rain across glass. "This is a crime. This airline is finished. Who knows a good lawyer? Tag them now." Victor breathed slowly. Inside him, fury roared, but outwardly his eyes remained like steel. He knew that every camera aimed his way was not only a witness but a weapon more powerful than any lawyer. Ethan Bradley folded his arms, feigning impatience. "I've said it already. Get him off. Some of us have real work to do. We can't be delayed." He pressed on the words "real work," as though whatever Victor carried in his case was nothing but scraps of paper. In row 3, an elderly woman broke into tears. "He's done nothing wrong." Her husband placed a hand on her shoulder, whispering, "Be quiet, they won't listen to us." Rosa Alvarez stepped forward, her voice straining for calm. "Mr. Caldwell, I understand you believe you're being treated unfairly. But by regulation, when the crew gives an instruction, passengers must comply. If you don't, this can be considered a federal violation." Victor looked at Rosa. In his gaze there was no fear, only a silent question. "Do you truly understand what you are doing?" His phone buzzed again. A message from his assistant flashed. "The Washington Post is about to run the story on this live stream. They've already confirmed your identity." Victor's lips curved in a faint smile, sharp as a blade. He didn't need to say a word. He simply folded the phone shut. Footsteps echoed from the cabin door. Security had arrived. 2 officers stepped inside, led by Patricia Long, a 40-year-old woman with a stern face. Notably, she was the only black member of the team. Linda pointed immediately. "There, passenger in 2A. Refused to comply. Needs to be removed at once." Patricia moved closer, her eyes meeting Victor's. Just a glance, but enough to know this was no ordinary, unruly passenger. His gaze was too calm, too familiar, the gaze of someone who had commanded boardrooms, not someone sneaking in with a fake ticket. "May I see your documents once more?" Patricia asked, her voice steady and deliberate. Victor handed her his ticket and card. She examined them closely, line by line. Everything was valid. But Mike Turner interjected, his tone brisk. "The crew has final authority in any seat dispute. We cannot delay a flight for one non-compliant passenger." Patricia pressed her lips together, her eyes still fixed on the gleaming ticket. She knew what she was seeing, but the rules bound her to the supervisors. Linda smiled with satisfaction, her tone hard as iron. You have two choices, Caldwell. Leave the plane voluntarily, or we'll drag you off. The cabin fell silent. Phones were raised high, their glow illuminating tense faces. Sophie whispered into her camera. This is it. They're about to drag him out. Remember this moment. Victor drew a deep breath. He set his case on the seat, then slowly rose to his feet. Every motion deliberate, as if time itself stretched with him. He looked at Linda, then Rosa, then finally straight into Sophie's camera. His voice rang out, every word sharp as a bell. I will leave, but mark my words. This mistake will cost Oceanic Airlines more than any flight in its history. A ripple of unease swept through the cabin. Linda paled. Rosa faltered. Mike scowled. Patricia froze, her eyes widening as though she had just heard a prophecy. Victor picked up his case and walked with measured steps toward the cabin door, under the gaze of dozens of passengers and tens of thousands of viewers online. No one yet realized that each step he took was another rung leading Oceanic Airlines toward the worst storm in its history. The cabin announcement echoed again. 8 minutes until doors close. Passengers, please take your seats. But first class was anything but settled. It had become a stage, where dozens of phones streamed leave the image of a man being forced from the seat that rightfully belonged to him. Victor Caldwell, hand gripping the handle of his leather case, strode toward the exit. His steps were slow and deliberate, each one striking the floor like a hammer against Oceanic Airlines' reputation. The moment Victor rose, Ethan Bradley leaned forward and immediately slid into seat 2A. He exhaled with smug relief, flashing a triumphant glance at Linda Hayes. Finally, bring me a glass of champagne, the coldest you have, he commanded, as if the world itself was his to order. Linda nodded quickly, her smile of victory plain to see. She ignored or chose not to see the cold stares of nearly every passenger in first class burning into her. Sophie Miller swung her phone to capture Ethan dropping into the seat. Her live stream erupted. 12,400 viewers watching live. Comments poured in like a storm. Zoom in on his face. He just stole that man's seat in plain sight. This will be the biggest PR disaster in airline history. Victor stopped in the middle of the cabin, turning his head back toward seat 2A. The image, a black man forced to leave his seat while a white man sat down and ordered champagne, seared itself as a living symbol of injustice. He said nothing more, just a fleeting smile, cold and knowing, before he turned away. In row 3, an elderly woman broke into sobs, whispering, "They've just made a terrible mistake." Her husband could only shake his head, eyes glistening. Rosa Alvarez drew a deep breath, struggling to maintain composure. But in her heart, unease was spreading. Victor's words, "This mistake will cost Oceanic Airlines," did not sound like an empty threat. Ethan lifted his champagne glass, whispering loudly enough for several to hear. Some people just need to learn their place. The words slipped straight into Sophie's live stream, and like a spark to gasoline, the audience exploded. The hashtag, #KnowYourPlace, appeared, joining #flight discrimination. Furious comments poured in. "This is blatant racism." "That man's career is over after saying that. Send this clip to every news outlet now." The live stream surged. 15,000, 16,800, 18,200 viewers. Meanwhile, Victor neared the door. Patricia Long, the security officer, stepped close, speaking low so only he could hear. "Sir, I know this is wrong, but please, stay calm. Here. I can't do more." Victor tilted his head slightly, his eyes softening for a moment. "You're right. Fighting here is pointless. But believe me, the real battle begins once I step outside that door." Patricia froze, the weight of his words heavy with a meaning she couldn't yet grasp. Mike Turner urged sharply, "Hurry up! We're out of time!" Linda nodded, her voice sharp with bitterness. "He should have left from the start." Victor turned back, his gaze passing over Linda, then Rosa, before settling on Sophie and the phone streaming to thousands. His voice rang out, clear and resonant through the cabin. "Remember this moment. A multi-billion-dollar airline has just turned itself into a spectacle before the entire world." No one answered. First class was drowned in heavy silence, broken only by the crackle of phones capturing every second. Victor stepped from the row. The cabin door ahead was open. He was about to leave, not as a defeated man, but as a warrior who had just planted the seed of a much greater battle. Sophie lowered her camera, her heart pounding. A thought echoed in her mind. He is no ordinary passenger. The real twist is still to come. The cabin door closed behind Victor, yet the echo of his final words hung in the air. A sentence suspended above Oceanic Airlines, like a judgment waiting to fall. The cabin announcement had barely faded when Victor Caldwell stopped in the aisle near the exit. He did not keep walking. Instead, he calmly set his leather case on the nearest seat and clicked the lock open. The soft snap of metal echoed in the heavy silence, drawing every eye in first class. Linda Hayes frowned. "What are you doing? I told you to leave this aircraft." Victor did not answer right away. He drew out a silver business card and a document printed on thick stock, handling them with the precision of a man unveiling weapons. The cabin lights reflected off the embossed lettering. He stepped forward, facing Rosa Alvarez and Mike Turner directly. His voice rose, no longer quiet, but steady and commanding, like a judge's gavel striking wood. "Before I walk off this plane, perhaps you should know exactly who you just made a mistake with." The cabin froze. Sophie Miller raised her phone higher, her heart pounding. The viewer count on her live stream surged past 20,000. Victor handed the card to Rosa. The embossed name glimmered. Victor Caldwell, Chief Executive Officer, Caldwell Capital Partners. Rosa read it, her eyes widening, her hand trembling. She had seen that name before, in confidential board reports, in urgent emails flagged from headquarters. Mike Turner snatched the card from her, frowning as he studied it, as if his own eyes might be deceiving him. But no, every letter was undeniable. Linda gave a sharp, mocking laugh, clinging desperately to arrogance. "Anyone can print a business card." Victor did not bother to reply. He lifted the second document instead. This was no ordinary paper. It was a stock certificate, sealed in red ink, his name in capital letters, bearing the words Caldwell Capital Partners, Preferred Stock Certificate, 23% voting rights, Oceanic Airlines. First class erupted in shock. Ethan Bradley, lounging smugly in seat 2A, nearly dropped his champagne glass. He stammered. 23% voting rights? Oh my God. Linda went pale, her body rigid, the words she had just sneered. Anyone can print a card. Instantly collapsed into farce. Victor adjusted his collar, his tone even but weighted like iron. Caldwell Capital has just injected $847 million into Oceanic Airlines. Tomorrow, I am scheduled to meet with the executive board to decide the future direction of this company. And today, you have shown me exactly why that investment must come with a complete overhaul. Sophie's live stream exploded. Comments raced across the screen faster than she could read. Plot twist! He owns the airline. Oceanic is finished. This will be taught in Harvard case studies. Rosa stepped back, drained of color. Mike Turner swallowed hard, numbers tumbling through his mind, hundreds of millions, nearly a quarter of corporate control. He suddenly realized that with one signature, this man could erase his entire career. Linda clung to the last scrap of authority. No matter who you are, there are still rules here. I have full authority in this cabin. Victor turned fully toward her. His eyes were ice, but his voice was low, almost gentle, and it sent chills through the cabin. No, Mrs. Hayes. True authority doesn't sit on a name badge sewn into a uniform. It lies in the numbers traded on Wall Street. And right now, with one phone call, I could send Oceanic's stock price into freefall. The cabin was silent. Even the engines outside seemed to quiet. Sophie's camera zoomed close on Victor's face. In her frame, he no longer looked like a humiliated passenger, but a titan of finance detonating a bomb in the middle of first class. The viewer count exploded. 28,000, 31,000, 35,000. Hashtags flooded social media. Hashtag flight discrimination. Hashtag Caldwell Capital. Hashtag Hickones. The airline. Victor folded the documents neatly back into his case. He tilted his head slightly, his gaze sweeping Rosa, Mike, then Linda. This is no longer a customer incident. This is a media disaster, a financial disaster, and a career disaster for everyone involved here. He looked to Sophie and gave a small nod. She understood instantly her live stream was now his official broadcast channel. The cabin quaked with realization. Oceanic Airlines had not just delayed a flight. They had humiliated their most powerful shareholder in front of tens of thousands of live witnesses, and the fallout was only beginning. First class on Oceanic Airlines Flight 447 shook like an earthquake. No one moved. Only the faint hum of the engines and the pounding of hearts filled the air as people struggled to grasp the truth they had just witnessed. Victor Caldwell closed his leather case, his eyes sweeping the cabin. With nothing more than a business card and a stock certificate, he had transformed a moment of humiliation into a masterstroke of power. Linda Hayes stood frozen, her lips moving but no sound emerging. Rosa Alvarez had backed away, clutching the boarding pass in trembling hands. Mike Turner gripped his radio so tightly his knuckles whitened, his eyes wide with the panic of a man staring into an abyss. Victor lifted his head, his voice ringing like a bell. You thought I was a disruptive passenger. In reality, I am the reason this airline can still take off today. Gasps rippled through the cabin. A passenger whispered, "My God, he's the airline's lead investor." Sophie Miller swung her phone to capture his face, her live stream exploding past 42,000 live viewers. Comments cascaded in like a flood. History's greatest plot twist. A CEO humiliated by his own airline. Oceanic is finished. In seat 2A, Ethan Bradley's hands trembled so violently, the champagne frothed over the rim. He forced a weak laugh. "Mr. Caldwell, I didn't know." Victor turned, his gaze cutting like a blade. "Ignorance does not absolve you, Bradley. You proved you were ready to profit from discrimination, and your words, 'Know your place,' are now immortalized before tens of thousands of witnesses." Ethan's face drained of color as he stared at the floor. Victor shifted to face Rosa and Mike. "You used your authority to force me from my seat. Now witness real authority. With a single call to my trading desk, Oceanic's stock will shed billions in minutes." He raised his phone, the glow of a stock chart lighting his stern face. Just as he said, the price was already sliding. News of the live stream was sweeping across social media, dragging the ticker downward with every passing second. "This is not just an incident," Victor declared, his voice sharp and final. "This is a systemic reputational risk. If Oceanic does not reform, it will collapse, and you will be the first witnesses to its death." Linda's body shook. At last she stammered, "Mr. Caldwell, I was only following policy." Victor cut her off, his words slicing the air. "Show me the policy that instructs staff to judge passengers by skin color. Show me the regulation that allows stealing a seat from a paying customer." "There is none, Hayes. Only prejudice. And today, that prejudice has been exposed." Scattered applause broke out across the cabin. Then it spread, louder, stronger, until the sound swelled like a rising tide toward Victor. Sophie's voice trembled in her live stream. "You are watching history. A CEO humiliated by his own airline, turning injustice into a mandate for change." Victor raised his hand. The applause stopped instantly. His voice lowered, yet carried even greater weight. "I did not come here seeking revenge. I came here to observe. And now I see clearly. Oceanic Airlines requires a complete overhaul." He fixed his gaze on Rosa, then Mike, then Linda, one by one. "I will make 5 demands. If this airline does not comply, Caldwell Capital will withdraw its investment, and with it, an entire network of billions in allied capital." The cabin fell silent. Passengers held their breath. Sophie's hands shook as she steadied her phone, knowing she was about to record what would become a corporate reform manifesto for the entire industry. Victor lifted his case again and drew out a thick binder. The cover gleamed with bold letters. "The Caldwell Protocol, Diversity and Equity Initiative." "This," he said, setting it down on the tray table with a thud that echoed like a war drum, "is the mandatory reform plan." The cabin froze. This was no longer an argument over a seat. It had become a boardroom at 35,000 feet. In just minutes, Oceanic Airlines had lost control. And now, power rested entirely in the hands of the man they had once dismissed, the man they had tried to force from seat 2A. The thick binder lay on the tray table of seat 2B like a block of stone, pulling the entire first-class cabin into silence. Every eye was fixed on Victor Caldwell. No one looked at Linda Hayes anymore. No one cared about Ethan Bradley shrinking in seat 2A. The only focus now was the man who had once been dismissed as an imposter. Victor opened the binder, each page crackling under the cabin lights. His voice rose, steady and deliberate, each word pounding like a drumbeat against the chest of everyone present. The Caldwell Protocol, mandatory reform plan, with 5 provisions. He raised his hand, his finger pointing to the first page. Provision 1. Mandatory bias recognition training. Every employee who interacts with passengers, flight attendants, ticket agents, supervisors, must complete 40 hours of training every year with exams and recertification. Fail, and you are removed from the passenger, facing duty. Whispers rippled through the cabin. Linda's face drained of color. Deep down, she knew if this took effect, her 12-year career would end here and now. Victor turned to the second page. Provision 2. Real-time monitoring system. An AI platform will analyze employee-passenger interactions and flag any sign of discrimination instantly. Development cost, $60 to $7 million, with $12 million annually to maintain. A small sum compared to the cost this airline has already inflicted on itself. Mike Turner swallowed hard. He knew that number could eat into the budget, but he also knew something else. If they didn't implement it, the market would destroy them. Victor pressed on, his voice even, but growing in force. Provision 3. Appointment of an independent civil rights inspector. This official will report directly to Oceanic's CEO and hold the power to terminate any employee who violates the policy. Annual budget, $8 million. First class sat frozen. The only sound was Sophie's pen, scratching against paper as she both streamed live and took notes. Victor lifted the fourth page. Provision 4. Quarterly diversity audits. An independent civil rights organization will conduct the audits. Results published and sent directly to the Department of Transportation. Cost, $5 million per quarter. From the back rows came a low murmur. This is total oversight. Victor paused, eyes burning, then lowered his voice like the stroke of a blade. Provision 5. A $50 million scholarship fund for minority communities. To train the next generation of pilots, engineers, and flight attendants, so that what happened today will never happen again. Sophie could hardly believe what she was recording. The live stream had surged past 60,000 viewers. Comments stormed across the screen. This isn't a flight. This is a revolution. The Caldwell Protocol will change the entire airline industry. Will Oceanic dare to refuse? Victor closed the binder, his hand pressing firmly on the cover as if sealing the verdict. First year cost, $165 million. From the second year onward, $70 million annually. A trivial amount compared to the $4.1 billion in market value that vanished in just 20 minutes. He raised his head, eyes sweeping across Rosa, Mike, and finally stopping on Linda. You have 24 hours. If you refuse, Caldwell Capital withdraws immediately. And when we withdraw, BlackRock, Vanguard, and State Street will follow. Oceanic Airlines will spiral into a collapse from which it cannot recover. The cabin erupted in a surge of emotion. Some passengers wept, Some clapped. Others gasped. "This is history!" Linda collapsed into a nearby seat, her whole body trembling. Ethan Bradley choked back a sob, hiding behind an empty champagne glass. Rosa Alvarez gripped her radio, her hand shaking so violently she nearly dropped it. Victor turned to Sophie, and her phone streaming live to the world. He spoke slowly, each word driven in like a nail. Discrimination is expensive. Accountability is priceless. Sophie bit her lip, her eyes blurred with tears. She knew that one line alone was enough to turn this moment into a global declaration. The cabin exploded with thunderous applause. Oceanic Airlines had just been handed the harshest ultimatum in its history, and no one dared breathe too loudly, because everyone understood. Power had changed hands. The next morning, at Oceanic Airlines headquarters in Dallas, sunlight had yet to spill through the towering glass windows. When the boardroom on the 38th floor was already suffocating with tension, the board of directors sat around the long walnut table, staring at breaking news flashing in red on the screen. Live stream discrimination hits 2.8 million views overnight. Stock drops 11%. Oceanic loses $1.2 billion in market value. Each headline cut into the company's pride like a knife. CEO Robert Carter, grey, haired at 50 Hall 2, clutched the report in his trembling hands, his voice breaking. "We will accept every term of the Caldwell Protocol. Immediately." The room went silent. Only the clicks of cameras echoed as reporters captured the moment, a giant airline bowing its head before its own disgrace. Robert drew a deep breath and continued, as though confessing. "Linda Hayes, lead flight attendant, terminated effective immediately. Records show 27 discrimination complaints in the past 5 years, none ever addressed." He paused, swallowed hard. "Mike Turner, ground supervisor, suspended for 30 days, required to complete 80 hours of bias training, permanently barred from holding a supervisory position." A board member tapped his pen lightly. "And Rosa Alvarez?" Robert nodded, his tone heavy. "Demoted to economy class, her record to be reviewed after 1 year. She has proven unfit to handle situations with fairness." The news feed on the big screen updated again. "Caldwell Capital doubles Oceanic stake after reforms accepted." Investors stabilize confidence. Robert looked up at the board, his eyes red. "We no longer have a choice. The Caldwell Protocol is not a proposal. It is a lifeline." The door swung open. Victor Caldwell walked in, carrying his familiar leather case. He needed no introduction. His presence alone brought the entire room to its feet. Victor strode to the head of the table and placed his case down. His voice rose, deep and steady, like a final verdict. "You have all seen how the world reacted. 2.8 million people watched Oceanic Airlines fail to protect the dignity of its passengers. Without change, that number becomes this airline's obituary." No one dared interrupt. Victor opened the case and drew out a contract. "The Caldwell Protocol takes effect today. 34,000 employees must complete certification training within 90 days. The AI monitoring system will begin pilot testing at JFK, LAX, and DFW within 6 months. An independent ombudsman must be appointed within 30 days. Quarterly audits will proceed, and the $50 million scholarship fund launches immediately." A human resources director spoke, voice unsteady. We have already contacted civil rights organizations to conduct the audits. The press release for the scholarship fund will be issued this afternoon. Victor nodded, his eyes glinting with icy resolve. Good. Because I intend for Oceanic Airlines not only to survive, but to become a symbol of transformation. He paused, then lowered his voice, though it carried across the entire room. You have just learned the most expensive lesson in the history of aviation. Discrimination is not only wrong, it bankrupts the future. The room sat in silence, as if a sentence had just been handed down. Robert Carter bowed his head. On behalf of Oceanic Airlines, I offer a public apology. And thank you, Mr. Caldwell, for forcing us to face the truth. Victor closed his case and stood tall. In that moment, he was no longer the victim humiliated in Seat 2A, but the leader who had turned first class into a courtroom of justice, forcing an Emma to bow. Outside, the headlines spread. Oceanic Airlines signs Caldwell Protocol, historic turning point in aviation. Discrimination is expensive. Accountability is priceless. And in the hearts of millions who watched, one truth was carved in stone. Silent power, when unleashed at the right moment, can transform an entire industry. That day in the sky, a first-class seat became undeniable proof. Discrimination can shake an airline within minutes, but responsibility and justice are what keep it standing for decades. Victor Caldwell did not simply reclaim his seat. He laid the foundation for an entire industry to change. If you believe that dignity should never be bargained, hit like to help this story reach further. Do not forget to subscribe to continue with the journeys ahead, where hidden truths will be revealed. And finally, leave a comment with just 2 words. Dignity, to affirm that you too stand on the side of justice.